As a little girl, you had a Barbie, and you wanted to be Barbie, and any guy within reach became Ken, or at least you thought he was. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about image and stereotypes with body image. One, stereotypes of body image for men and women and how that affects you. Two, the social psychological effects and how it has on people that are either models or even just those in society based on media. And lastly, how a lot of images we see today of what you should be will promote sexual objectification of women, especially when we look at things that are so close to home. For example, the Women of KU swimsuit calendar that has recently been an issue and assumed to have negative effects on those affected by it. Like I said, not only the models, but those also who are just partaking in what they see in society, being that it is a public swimsuit calendar. I first want to mention that the KU swimsuit calendar is in no way, shape, or form affiliated, endorsed, or sanctioned by the University of Kansas. It's not a policy. Um, and so it's not related to Kansas, just like a Twitter account or something that Kansas does not have control over could still be accessed by a majority of KU students. So I just want to go ahead and clear the air with that. Secondly, I'll move on to my first main point, just about the stereotypes of body image, what people think when they think of models and things like that. In an article I recently did some research on, an intervention for the negative influence of media of body esteem, and this is a study conducted by Sheeran Smith, two research psychologists who worked with Tufts University and Wake Forest. They just conducted a study about this disorders based on these stereotypes and how they lead to a lot of different eating disorders of bulimia and depression and a whole bunch of different negative psychological effects that we have just by seeing these images every day. For example, the endorsement of models, like a regular model is supposed to be a certain size versus you have a regular model and you have a skinny model. So little things like that we see in society every single day constantly influence how we react with society. So when we look at something so close to home like the University of Kansas swimsuit calendar, we say, okay, this woman is small, she's very petite, she's a certain height, she's a certain race, a certain hair color, eye color. I should be like that to be sexually desirable. And so the study that they have conducted basically says that the negative effects will lead to not only women just having physical issues with that, or bulimia, or anorexia, or things like that, to obtain the image of what they're seeing being plastered across media. Men also have an outlook because they feel that in their minds, this is what a woman should look like. These should be the normal proportions of a woman. And we'll get into that a little bit later, discussing just about how media is able to contort things like that. And so that's why the whole having things like Women of KU, even though it's not affiliated with KU, having things like that need to be reprogrammed and just reconsidered about the image and what they're portraying, especially when you're dealing with a college campus. I was going to tap into a little bit of how it can lead to more sometimes sexual assaults, and maybe not even necessarily that could be more of a stretch, but just how we are so impressionable right now, and we are young adults, and we're becoming even more mature and getting on with our careers, and so the issue of image becomes so much more prevalent than ever before, and it becomes more in depth and more mental than being in high school. So kind of on my second point, a little bit, that social psychological effects are very prevalent on people, not even if you are a model, just men and women in general. And that kind of goes a little bit off of the stereotypes associated just with being a model, that you have to be a certain height or a certain weight, and that if you do not fit into that category, you are obese, you are unattractive, you will not fit the golden ratio of what is beauty in America in 2014. So looking at my next point, basically men, they're one of their psychological effects would be actual physical depression, because they desire to have a woman that looks a certain way based on what they have been taught and based on what they're seeing in images over and over again. And women desire to have this power of being sexy, that if they are not sexy, that they are not a little bit less conservative, if you will, then they are not fulfilling their purpose. The whole idea of a woman should be she should be powerful, but not too powerful. She shouldn't be necessarily docile, but she shouldn't be a weak will-minded woman. That kind of goes into what we're seeing when we look at things so risque as a swimsuit calendar because the body is exposed, and we'll kind of move on that. From young, it kind of increases a level of promiscuity, and that's a study that was done by some doctors at Washington University of St. Louis, and according to campaignforrealbeauty.com. And that's just saying that from little girls see, for example, I brought back the Barbie image of Barbie is very petite. She has a small waist, and I'll even show you some images later and like show you kind of a skewed thing of what we would have to be Barbie size. But Barbie is a very dainty, small woman. But realistically, if if we were to be a Barbie, we would just fall over because our head couldn't support our neck couldn't support our heads, and our waist would snap in half, and our backs would break, and we wouldn't have be able to walk because our ankles would be too narrow. But people don't see that, and from a little girl, people have this image of saying, I want to be this, it's okay to be this, and then in society it's constantly plastered all over, and it doesn't make it any better. So when I looked at the womenofku.com website that you can apply to be featured in the swimsuit calendar, it asks for your name and your address and kind of a little bit about yourself and what your goals are, and it also asks your height and weight. And it gives an example. Example for height would be 5'7", and example for weight would be 125. And I just want to take a minute to kind of analyze that and say that um, if a woman was maybe 135 pounds, would she feel like she needs to push it down a little bit because this is a suggested weight? Little things like that really impact your psychological, your interpretation of what you should be. And so maybe if I'm 5'6", I'm too short. If I'm 5'8", I'm a little bit too tall. Or if I'm heavier than 125, I'm not good enough. And so again, these are all studies from the campaign for realbeauty.com and the website that talks about the golden ratio. And that was also featured in one of Oprah's magazines and on her website, o.com. So, or one of her magazines as well, sorry. So lastly, my last main point would be that it promotes sexual objectification of women, and we should kind of take a stance on how far we allow media to go with things. Just looking at a whole bunch of different websites, and I'll like credit some of those sources later, and I have some of those things with me as handouts that you can just see where I've gotten a lot of this information from, just like the sexualization of women in media, just a whole bunch of different studies conducted especially by universities and everything, and a lot of psychologists just saying how women don't even look in magazines how they actually are. They are photoshopped, they are edited, they are tanned, they are stripped completely different. There's actually a really good image I'll show you later, just a little bit, or I've showed you while I'm talking, of how this woman starts off as a piece of pizza, and they are able to Photoshop it and Photoshop it or modify it into a way that she looks like a woman with a red bikini on, and you would never know where that picture began. So just little things like that are kind of just why we need to reevaluate the images that we're putting into society and the audience that we're affecting, because I think a lot of people don't realize the impact of what they're having and what they're posting. So my whole claim is just a little bit of how a lot of these different features, like stereotypes, it promotes sexual objectification, things like this, they're happening in our own backyard. And starting, with the Women of KU swimsuit calendar, we've got to make a difference. We've got to take a stance on ending the sexual objectification towards women, ending this unrealistic expectation for men, and just showing what the beauty comes in all different shapes and sizes, and that what we see constantly plastered in billboards, advertisements, commercials is not realistic. Many models that you see in magazines do not even look like what they look like. They aspire to look like that, just like you. So that's just my whole point, basically, and hopefully you can kind of understand what I'm saying. In conclusion, just basically, like, it's normal to have an expectation to look better, that you always want to better yourself, but it becomes an issue when there are lots of psychological effects that it has on you, such as depression and anxiety and what the need for plastic surgery and never being quite fulfilled with what you have or what you're given, and just like the things that can spiral out of control, especially as a college student, how we are still learning, we're still evolving, and we're very impressionable, and society and media has like a huge impact on that. So just taking a stance of something something, just starting with like a calendar can definitely make a difference.